James doesn't shift topics when he enters chapter 4, y'all. He goes after the root. After addressing trials, obedience, and the tongue, he then exposes what fuels conflict in the first place. And that's a heart that still wants control. He opens with a question that refuses surface answers. And that's in verse 1 through 3. From whence comes wars and fightings among you? Question mark. Come they not hence? Even of your lust, that war in your members? Question mark. Ye lust and have not. Ye ask and receive not, because ye asked amiss. Now, James says conflict doesn't start with people. It starts with desire. And these wars aren't just physical, y'all. They're emotional, rational, and spiritual. They happen when wants are unchecked and allegiances is divided. When James says, ye kill, he's not exaggerating. Not at all. He's aligning with what Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 5. Anger, contempt, and hatred destroy long before hands ever move. Destruction begins in the heart. Not up here, but in the heart. James then explains why some prayers go unanswered. We ask amiss. That word means misaligned, wrongly motivated, centered on self instead of submission. James is saying God isn't silent. He's just refusing to bless what he's trying to correct. Then James, he sharpens the language as he goes further. In verse 4, he says, ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Question mark. Now, throughout the letter, James says, my brethren. But here, he calls out spiritual unfaithfulness. Ooh, child. This is covenant language, y'all. Divided loyalty is betrayal. James echoes Jesus' word that no one can serve two masters. How can you? Lukewarm. That's straight lukewarm. Enmity means hostility and opposition. Friendship with the world isn't neutral. Loving the world values mean resisting God's rule. This is not about living in the world. It's about loving, approval, comfort, control, and status more than obedience. Now, James goes on to explain God's response in all this. In chapter 5, it says, the spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy. This is not sinful envy, y'all. This is God's fierce longing for undivided devotion. His jealousy is not covenant love refusing to compete. Not at all. And then James brings hope. He brings us a little hope, y'all. Because this chapter is going to call you out. God gives more grace. Not grace that excuses pride, but grace that meets humility. Pride is self-rule. Humility is surrender. That's why James calls believers to submit to God, resist the devil, draw near, cleanse their hands, purify their hearts, and repent. A divided heart can experience peace. James then turns to how believers treat one another. Ooh, my mouth getting dry, y'all. In verses 11 to 12, it says, speak not evil one of another, and it continues. James is confronting speech that damages reputations and fractures trust. Using the tongue to harm others places us above the law instead of below it. There is only one judge. Our rule is obedience, not comparison. James then addresses presumption. In verses 13 through 17, he reminds us that life is vapor, brief, it's borrowed, not guaranteed. Knowing the right thing to do and refusing to do it is sin. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. Or I'll do it later. I'll get it right one day. Now, going on to chapter 5, it don't get no softer. James warns against trusting riches instead of God. Wealth is not condemned. It's not. But reliance on it is. Comfort hoarded while others suffer exposes a divided heart. Then James turned to the believers who are suffering. In verses 7 through 8, be patient, therefore, brethren, and continues on. James calls for patience, not passivity. He points to the farmer who works faithfully and waits. Growth can't be rushed. God isn't late. The harvest is forming. James points to the prophets and to Job. Everybody know Job. They suffered while obeying. Job's suffering wasn't abandonment. James reminds us that the end of the Lord is mercy. God is very pitiful and of tender mercy. James then addresses integrity. Yeah. And what verse is that? Verse 12 says, let your yea be yea, your no be no. And it continues on, y'all. Believers should be so trustworthy that extra promises are unnecessary. Integrity should make oaths obsolete. You shouldn't have to, oh, I swear, or I promise, I this. Then James circles back and talks about prayer in 13 and 15. Is any of if is any among you afflicted? Question mark. Let him pray. Is any among you? Question mark. Let him call for the elders. Prayers belongs in every season. James doesn't emphasize the sick person's faith. He emphasizes the faith of those praying for the sick. Called on the elders itself is an act of trust. James also corrects a false belief. Sickness is not always caused by sin. Sins may be involved, but it's not because of the sin that you're sick. Then James reaches one of the most misunderstood verses there is, y'all, and that's verse 16. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. James is not commanding public exposure or careless vulnerability. Confession here means honest acknowledgement within trusted community. Faults refer to weaknesses and failures, not performances or shame. God never designed believers to suffer in isolation. Silence may feel safer, but it rarely heals. When struggles are brought into godly fellowship, prayer becomes specific. Healing becomes possible, and shame loses its power. And James is showing us something deeper. Something deeper, y'all. Often it's only after God brings us through a season that everything begins to make sense. Not because the pain was good, but because God was faithful in it. What once felt confusing becomes purposeful. God doesn't heal us only for ourselves. He brings us through so what we redeemed in us can strengthen in someone else. What he redeemed in us. Job's suffering it became instruction, y'all. It became testimony. In the same way, what God carried us through may be exactly what someone else needs to endure their own trial. Confession isn't about exposure. It's about connection. It's about prayer and about healing. And James reinforces this with Elijah. In 17 through 18, Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are. And he prayed earnestly. Elijah was human, but what set him apart was earnest prayer. And earnest mean intentional, persistent, aligned with God's will. God responded because Elijah surrendered. He surrendered. James closes with restoration in verses 19 and 20. If any of you do err from the truth and one convert him, and it goes on. Now, right here, James paints a picture of a community that refuses to let people drift alone. Turning someone back is not judgment. It's rescue. Watching someone wander and staying silent is not kindness at all. A lot of people say, oh, well, that ain't my business. I ain't saying nothing. James ends where he began. Faith isn't theoretical. Faith is lived. Faith submits. Faith prays. Faith waits. And faith restores. James is not calling believers to perfection. He's calling them to surrender. Come on now, somebody. And the grace that saves us is the same grace that teaches us how to live. James doesn't leave us with comfort. He leaves us with clarity. He shows us that faith isn't proven by what we claim, but by what we surrender. Not by how loudly we believe, but how deeply we submit. It's not about how well we speak, but how faithfully we live when pressure exposes what rules us. James has been pressing one truth the entire time, y'all. God isn't after a version of faith that agrees with him. He's after a faith that yields to him. A faith that lays down pride instead of defending it. A faith that prays instead of posturing. A faith that waits without quitting. And a faith that speaks with care. And y'all know what? A faith that restores instead of ignores. This letter isn't meant to shame us. It's meant to wake us up. Because the grace that saves us does not leave us unchanged. It does not. You cannot come in contact with Jesus and feel nothing. It teaches us how to live, how to love, how to endure, and how to walk together. James leaves us with this, he leaves us with an invitation. Not to try harder, but to surrender deeper. And that's where real faith begins. And I can contest with the verse 16 through 20 when he talks about Job and Elijah. You know, often when we go through things, we don't realize the lessons in it. We don't. Now, once we get through those trials, then we realize, everything, all light bulbs goes off. God did not intend for our testimony, our test, to not be a testimony. Our tests are to become a testimony so we could witness to someone else to help them walk. Too many of us be ashamed of, I ain't going to tell that part. What people going to think about me, how I'm going to look. You cannot have pride and love at the same time. You cannot. You cannot have faith and worry at the same time. Now, people will tell you the excuses. We're not perfect. We're not perfect. We're just human. What else are we if we just human? What else would we be? But we need to stop using excuses. We need to stop using excuses all the time to answer for the things we come short of. It should not be like that. The answers are all in the Bible. They're all in the Bible. We often cry, we fret, we frown, we get angry. I've been there, but I'm not ashamed of what God brought me through. Who am I to keep that to myself when he's been so good to me? Who am I to do that? Abuse, neglect, love, trying to find love in the wrong places. No. Your test will become your testimony if you have faith, if you wait on God, if you pray, if you surrender. Surrender, y'all. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to complain. We're going to get loud. We just complain. We may even stop praying. God not answering me, so I'm going to stop. But once you submit, hey, there's no more lesson to teach you. Come on now, y'all. We all need to get it together. We need to get it together because the times is changing and God is coming back soon.